All right, here we go. Welcome to Mod 7. This is Nutrition 102. And the reason why I separated the two nutritions here, because we have a Nutrition 101 that's about macros and micros, and then we have this, is because there are two different elements to eating. There's recompositioning your body, getting good foods in your body, what macros do, what micros do, what kind of vitamins do, but then there's also education on what food is and what food has become. And food has changed a lot in the last 50 years. In general, it's changed a lot. There's been genetically modified foods where they've changed the actual DNA of the crop. We'll get into that. Lots of processed dyes and things are in foods. Foods aren't quite as whole as they used to be. So we're going to talk a little bit in depth about each of those things and kind of go through the food groups and go through what it looks like to eat the processed versions of these foods. These foods are all coming from natural sources, but they've been changed so much that they're not quite food anymore. So we're going to talk about how that process has happened and what's in these foods and how it's affecting you. So let me do this. Yeah, so first of all, let's start with this. Food is the best flipping thing ever. So we are not saying that food is bad. Food is amazing. So it keeps you alive. It tastes great. It's fun to go out and eat with other people. It's great to cook with. You know, you live off it. You need food. Food is good. So we're not saying food's bad, but we want to know what's in our food, because this whole training and learning how to nourish your body is all about really learning to take responsibility for your life and for your health. And if we don't really know what's in our food, then we can't fully take responsibility for it. So food has changed a lot, like we said. It's, been changed in the last 50 years. For example, wheat, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in depth, but wheat, gluten, has been modified and changed for years. And really, this is a problem because when they've changed the DNA of the wheat, then it changes into something else, and the molecular structure is different. There's different proteins in it, and the body doesn't fully recognize that. And this is with a lot of foods, not just wheat. So, and what is wheat doing to you? So here's the other issue, or not just wheat, processed food. What are processed foods doing to you? So the other issue is that, let's go back. The other issue is that when you are eating food that's been changed, it's doing different things to your body than food that is in its most natural state. So, 1 second here. I just want to click out of this because I have Voxer people writing to me, and that's not good because they're being loud. All right, there we go. Boop. There we go, back to what we were doing. All right, so we're going to go over what's really in our food and how it's affecting our body, because once we know what we're eating, so let's say that we love chicken nuggets, but we just think that it's chicken breaded. When we really find out what's in it, it may detour us from eating those things, and that's a good thing, because processed foods that have been altered, aren't really good for us. They're actually affecting us in a really negative way. So we're going to go over what's in your food. We're going to touch a little bit about the food industry and the FDA. We're going to talk about the FDA and what they're doing with food, how it's affecting your health, so what it's causing what's happening within your body when you're eating these processed foods. And then we're also going to talk about what you can do about it, because we always want to have an option where, okay, now that you know, what's the next step? So the first thing that we're going to talk about here is the FDA. So this is the Food and Drug Administration. These guys approve all of the foods and drugs for human consumption. So they're the ones that when a food is manufactured and processed, or is in the works of being created, or even is just a produce, or is a vitamin, a supplement, all these things, the FDA has to approve it so it can go onto the shelves. And the problem with the FDA is that the FDA assures the public that it's transparent, it's not doing anything wrong, that it has our best interest in mind, but its actions show otherwise, this corporation, this government corporation. So what ends up happening is the FDA will deny agencies and journalism coming in and doing research, research from Fox News, all these different radio stations, all these different TV channels, they will cut off and restrict the ability for them to come in and see what they're doing and how they're passing things and what's actually in our food. And they will make it seem like, oh, everything's okay, and they'll give just bits and parts of the story. And many different agencies and journalism companies and people that are in search of what's actually going on and what's being put in our food and what's actually red dye, how is it affecting our bodies, will go in and try to talk to the FDA, and they put these really harsh restrictions on people coming in and actually digging deeper and finding out what are in these substances. And they'll put a restriction on who comes in and what is reported. So they actually have journalism and people that are in journalism that they'll approve because they have an ulterior motive. These people are being paid, or the FDA is being paid off by some of these drug and pharmaceutical companies, and companies like Monsanto, which is the largest GMO producing grain organization in the world, will be paying off the FDA to put through these foods that aren't actually healthy for us. So as much as we want to trust the government, and I'm not being like an anarchist or anything by saying this, but the FDA, the way that it's regulated is really, there's a lot of politics involved, and not a lot is released. And what is released is just oftentimes part of the story. So you really need to do your research and not just trust what the FDA is saying. Now, of course, they have to, they can't do everything. They can't just pass everything as organic. There's a lot of different things behind this, but really what it comes down to is being your own investigator. And we'll talk about that more, but the FDA is very secretive about their information and doesn't release much. So you have to find ulterior sources or different places for this information to come from. So some of the things, I'm going to go through a few things that have been found out that the FDA has pushed through and has said is okay, just from outside sources and people going in and actually getting information. So one thing that the FDA has been doing is they've been passing mercury. So, and these are from some studies that I've researched over the years through my schooling, through just talking to other people. So one of the things that's happening is out of the 55 most popular brand name foods and beverage products, 1/3 of those contain some element of mercury. And research has shown that you're more likely to consume mercury if you consume processed foods or any of these really popular beverage products. And the most prominent source of, mercury containing foods are ones with high fructose corn syrup. So the high fructose corn syrup has the most mercury out of any of these processed foods. And this is really bad because mercury affects, the toxicity of your body, your ability to think. It can, cause cancer. It can cause growths. They test rats with it and they get all these different growths. And the average American consumes 37 pounds of high fructose corn syrup, which contains mercury, a year on average. And so the FDA is passing this off. You don't actually read mercury in a lot of these labels, things like Lucky Charms, all these different dyes that are in food. Anything with high fructose corn syrup has the possibility that it contain mercury. And so these really processed box brands, General Mills, all these things can contain this, and then the FDA pushes it through and does not label that on the actual label itself because it's, there's mercury within the products that they're listing. They don't have to actually list it if it's within a product. So that's just, these are very short versions that I'm going through of these things. This is just to kind of spark your interest so later you can do a little research and dig a little deeper. So another one is genetically modified meat. So for example, we'll take salmon, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in the meat section, but salmon is, when it's wild caught, it's beautiful, it's delicious, it's full of nutrition, omega-3s. Unfortunately though, the FDA has passed through farm-raised fish that have been injected with dyes and things like high fructose corn syrup and different additives. So these fish are growing up in farms. They're not eating krill, so they're actually gray in color because salmon will eat food like little krill and little things that will turn them pink. So the farm-raised salmon are eating processed genetically modified grains, which are completely void of nutrition, and then they're dyed pink and sold to you as healthy and sold to you as just as good as the other one. So the FDA passes this. They don't say anything about it. They ignore the potential dangers of the dyes being put in the meat, and they just think nothing else of it. Another one is artificial sweeteners. So this one's bad because and we'll talk more about artificial sweeteners, there's a whole section on it, but things like aspartame, sucrose, these things, just even added sugar, are very addictive and really toxic to your body. And they cause addiction, they cause shakiness, they cause mental changes in your brain, actually changing the way that you're thinking because they're getting you on this insulin high. And these artificial sweeteners are coming from things like E. coli and different viruses. So it's really gross what some of these artificial sweeteners are made out of. And yet, again, the FDA approves these things and labels them as food. Keep in mind, most of these things that we're talking about are banned in almost all other countries, especially in European and Asian countries. They don't even use these foods. GMO corn, they pass. 85 to 90% of corn is genetically modified, meaning that they've modified insecticide within the actual grain itself and changed the DNA of the grain. So when it grows up and bugs eat it, they explode. Their guts will explode. Well, guess what that is doing to our guts? And they say that this is fine, that they're producing more food, GMO is the way to go, etc., etc., etc. All right. And by the way, going back to GMO, Monsanto is one of the biggest corporations, and their goal is to genetically modify all food so it grows faster, grows bigger, and to take control of the food industry. And that sounds like, oh my gosh, take over the world, but it is kind of scary, and it's a slow behind the scenes process, but they would love to have everything genetically modified because then they control all of the crops, which is really scary because when things are modified, we don't digest them the same. And just other harmful substances that are put into our foods and whatnot. So that's just a little bit on the FDA. They're letting a lot of things go through the just kind of pass by, and they're not really doing much about it. So this is kind of a challenge because we're not getting educated, and they're just putting things into our foods. So we're going to go through now what's in our food, and we're going to go by each kind of food category, or the biggest offenders, I'll say. The biggest offenders in what's being put into our food. So, all right, so the first one is sugar and artificial sweeteners. So sugar we think of as like table sugar, or it's in soda, but we don't really think about how much is in our food and what foods are in it. So sugar can be hidden in things like ketchup, freezer meals, smoothies, syrups, things that are considered health foods like health drinks and whatnot. Sugar is hidden in everything, and so is artificial sweeteners. They're just kind of jammed into different things because when you taste sugar, you get addicted and it raises your insulin and you feel better. So then when you crash, you crave that again. So food is actually modified and created so that there's a lot of sugar in it. Like when you go to a gas station, there's no low sugar green juices, or there's not often kombuchas or anything like that. There's a lot of energy drinks and sugary drinks because they get you hooked. And then when you're hooked, you want to go back for more and more and more. And too much sugar, like I said, is very addictive, and it can cause diabetes. It can mess up your metabolism. And when you are eating a lot of sugar and you're having that up and down, and it messes up your sensitivity to insulin and can cause metabolic syndrome, which is a really low metabolism and issues with digesting properly and processing carbs in general. And this is a really big issue in America, that a lot of people have insulin issues, and it's due to this excessive amount of sugar and processed carbs that are spiking our blood sugar and everything. So like a really good example of hidden sugar is if you go to Starbucks and you're like, I want a healthy green smoothie. Oh, it's healthy. It has some fruit in it. The problem is it actually doesn't have that much fruit in it, and it has lots of added sugar. Even just like the lowest sugar smoothie can be 25 grams of added sugar on top of these like really frozen processed fruits that have been condensed. And you're getting, 190 grams of sugar in this one drink, and it just spikes your insulin. So the issue with that is that when we eat these things, again, we get really addicted to them. They're really hard on our body. There's not a lot of nutritional value in these things. It's just sugar, which converts very fast, spikes your insulin, spikes your hormones, and gets you all jittery. And, you know, like when kids eat sugar, they get jittery. We kind of get like that high and feel a little bit better, and then we crash. And let's see, what else? Oh yes, we talked about the metabolism. Really hard on your metabolism. Really messes with it. You when you don't have fiber to kind of back up these sugars, or there's not a lot of nutrients within the foods, it just converts so quickly into your body that it really can throw off your hormones. And then it can cause binge cycles, weight gain, insulin issues, chronic pain, chronic inflammation, because sugar is really hard on your immune system, so it'll cause inflammation. All right, so here's a few things. We kind of talked about this a little bit, that too much sugar can cause. Now, they say that the average person should consume about 22 teaspoons of sugar or tablespoons of sugar a day, which is still quite a bit, but most people are eating 100 plus, and it can cause things like we talked about: obesity, hypoglycemia, so that's issues with your blood sugar, metabolic syndrome, really just a flat line of your metabolism, cardiovascular disease, tooth decay, dizziness, food allergies, even because it's causing such a allergy response, issues with your cholesterol, hypertension, things, you know, just for being sore, achy, colon, pancreatic cancer. It's really hard on your gut. And this is just, you know, some things to talk about a little bit. And highly processed white carbs are no better. So these, like white breads, baked goods that are processed with a lot of flour and with the sugar in them as well. White, what's that bread called? Wonder bread. These things convert very quickly, just like table sugar, into sugar in your body. And then you just end up feeling awful, and you're getting a lot of calories, you're getting a lot of caloric intake carb-wise, but you're not getting any nutrition or micronutrition to back it up. So your body craves more because it's not meeting any nutritional needs, so it wants to eat more so it can get a little bit of nutrition. So that's why there's a lot of overeating of processed white carbs and just wheat just normal pasta that's not whole grain, fiber rich, bleached wheat flour pasta. Those types of things will really wreak havoc on your hormones and are just completely depleted of nutrition. They've been bleached. They've been, you know, you think of grains as like the stalk of wheat, and they've processed that so much that there's actually no nutritional value anymore when you eat just wheat flour pasta. So it's very devoid of nutrition and high in carbs and addictive. And then we have, even worse, I would say, is artificial sweeteners. So the reason why I say artificial sweeteners are even worse is because not only is it this molecule that's similar to sugar that doesn't have any calories, but it tricks your body into thinking, because it's the same molecular structure to your tongue. It tastes sweet because it's this little hexagon molecular structure. It causes you to crave more. So when you eat a Sweet and Low or a Splenda, or even too much stevia, which is more natural, you can really crave more, and you trick your body into thinking that you're getting sugar. And not only that, but the artificial sweeteners are chemicals. They're not actually sugar. They're chemically made to taste like sweetener. They're completely fake. And these can be in things like diet soda, gummies, candies, and artificial sweeteners also will really affect your digestion. That's why when you eat a sugar-free thing and you get upset and you have to run to the bathroom, it's because it's just really upsetting your stomach in a big way. So we'll talk about a few artificial sweeteners of these things, just kind of to pin on the most prominent ones. And then if you're curious on what these other ones do, you can go ahead and look them up as well. But first I want to talk about diet soda. So the diet sodas are worse than actual sodas because they're faking out your body to think that you're getting a sweetness, and it just leads you to crave more and more because you want to eat. You want to have that sugar fix. You want to really get the sugar in your body. And when you're eating fake sugar, you crave real sugar. So it's kind of this endless cycle. And artificial sweeteners have been linked to depression, just all these horrible issues with your brain function, because it really just will kind of mess up your neural pathways, because you're eating something that's so high in sugar, that's a chemical, the body doesn't know how to process it. Let's see. Okay, so going back to diet sodas. So diet soda also is as acidic as battery acid. So when you drink diet soda, you are completely decaying your teeth by drinking something that's as acidic as battery acid, and it can really wreak havoc on the acidity of your stomach and your digestion. So when that goes through your body, it's these fake sugars, these chemicals, your body doesn't know how to process them, it can't use them for food, it craves more of them, and then it also is acidic, so it's like almost burning holes in your intestine, because your body just does not know how to process this diet soda and these artificial sweeteners that have been made out of chemicals that are really toxic. The body doesn't really know how to detox them, it doesn't know what to do with them, so it craves more of that thing because it's hoping for, well, if you're going to eat this, maybe I need more, and there will be nutrition in it the next time. We'll talk about specifically aspartame here, because this is kind of the worst offender, the most common one that I see in things other than sucrose. So aspartame is in like sugar, gums, sugar-free everything. You know, it seems like it's healthy when you're trying to cut out sugar, but when tested on monkeys, aspartame, which is like this diet sugar, actually caused cancer in these monkeys and led to a lot of infertility issues for them. And studies on humans provided birth defects, like a child mortality rate that was a lot higher, premature births when it was tested that people had been eating a lot of this, even things like brain cancer was the most prominent cancer. And that's why a lot of times when you eat aspartame, you'll get a headache, because it's directly affecting your brain. It gets in your brain, and it's like it kind of like crystallizes and just gets stuck to your brain. Your body doesn't know how to get rid of it. And so aspartame is added in things to make them sweet without the sugar. But what actually is aspartame? So aspartame, this artificial sweetener, is the fecal matter of E. coli. So E. coli fecal matter, so this virus that it's gross has been made into this processed powder. So E. coli fecal matter made into this processed powder and is put into sweetening things that you're eating. And I don't know how they process it, but that is where it originates from, is E. coli. And another study is when they did experiments on rats with this, it was about 67% of the female rats developed tumors roughly the size of golf balls or larger when they started eating aspartame on a daily basis. So aspartame is easy to eat. It's in things like yogurt, diet soda, so you really have to watch out for it, because if you have one drink with it, you're not going to die, but overexposure to a lot of chemicals and these artificial sweeteners is going to lead to your body not being able to process the toxins, craving more of it, and possibly having tumors or issues with your digestion because of these artificial substances that your body doesn't know quite what to do with. Another one is high fructose corn syrup. So we talked a little bit about that being cross-contaminated with mercury. It's a main carrier for harmful elements like we were talking about earlier, like mercury and whatnot. And high fructose corn syrup, again, is this corn that has been processed into sugar, and it's been processed so much into a syrup that there's no nutritional value. And it, again, is really messing with your endocrine system, because when you're putting different sugars and sweeteners into your body, chemicals, your endocrine system, so like your reproductive system, your adrenal glands, even your digestive system, so all of these systems of the body, it's a heavy load for them to process. And with sugar, and even with artificial sugar, they're very depleting of nutrition. So things like caffeine and sugar, these processed chemicals will deplete the nutrition in your body. So it takes 64 molecules of magnesium to digest and process 1 molecule of sugar. And so don't be afraid to eat things like apples and whatnot, but when you're eating these diet sodas and breads and things that turn into sugar very quickly and are really high in sugar, you're depleting your body of minerals, because it takes so many minerals from healthy things to digest and assimilate and process these things. And then on top of the sugar, when it's a substance that the body doesn't recognize, it takes even more nutrition to process those foods. So you're really, by taking these artificial nutrition or these sweeteners, not only are you depleting your body of nutrition, but you're also giving yourself this like addiction, because you're depleting your body of nutrients. It tastes good, it feels good, you're not getting any nutrition, so you grab for the next one. And we could go on and on about that, but in short, that is what is up with artificial sugars. They're made out of chemicals, aspartames from E. coli, and processed carbs will lead to metabolic syndrome and really just deplete your body of nutrition and cause inflammation. So that is just the very short version. There's so much more to it, but I have to summarize a lot of these so I don't go too long. So now we're going to move on to fats. Bad fats. Fats are good. Good fats are good. Bad fats are bad. So we have like a little list here, because I often, when you put up fats as bad, people avoid them completely. You don't want to do that. But things like coconut oil, olive oil, avocados, whole eggs, those are all really good fats. But we're going to talk about hydrogenated oils, canola oils, margarine, and fake butters right now, so that you can realize that these alternatives are not good. They're no to the alternatives. So all right, so bad fats often contain plastic. So to kind of give the butter that buttery look, and for it to really kind of flow much like natural oils, the margarine will contain plastic, so it has that same texture. Now, these processed oils, again, what processing does is when you take a whole food and you process it, you change the genetic makeup of it, or you process it over and over again, it changes the structure of that food. It changes the DNA of that food. So when we're processing these things and adding plastic into these fake butters and hydrogenated oils that have been heated up and changed and processed, and this is taken out of it and that's taken out of it, it begins to have an imbalance in the omega ratio. So healthy fats like olive oil, coconut oil, avocados have a ratio of omegas. So, and that's things like fish oil, there's omegas in fish oil of really high. So healthy fats have a lot of really good omega-3s, and they're higher in that. And then they have just a little bit of 6 and 9. That's naturally occurring. When you have fake fats, the ratio of a 6 is just 100 times higher than it naturally occurring. It would be naturally occurring. And then 9 is excessively high as well. And then you have a really low 3 ratio. So when you have these imbalance of omegas, what ends up happening is you get inflammation in your body. So your body gets inflamed, the immune system gets inflamed, the tissue in the body gets inflamed, because these healthy fats, the high omegas, the olive oil, the avocados, they lower the inflammation, they cool the body, they calm the body down, they're full of nutrition, the body knows how to process these oils, they help the joints be mobile, they help your brain. But when you get a really imbalanced ratio of omegas, then you get this inflammation, your body flares up, your gut can flare up, and it can cause all sorts of autoimmune issues. Things like fibromyalgia, so when people get achy, when they're having gut issues, there's inflammation, achiness, their shoulder hurts, if they haven't just injured it, it's just getting worn out, they're bloated, the joint hurts to walk, not limber. These are all inflammatory things. Allergies are inflammatory things, and this can be from eating really toxic processed fats. Let's see here. Okay. All right, moving on. So the latest research shows that margarine is worse than butter. So often butter gets a really bad rap, and that's why these fake margarines have been created, because they were kind of an alternative to butter. But in actuality, grass-fed whole butter is actually really good for you, and these fake things are much worse for your health. Fake butters, even though they don't have sugar, can actually higher your insulin levels, and because you're getting inflammation, and it can suppress the immune system. So that's where that inflammation comes from, is it's suppressing the immune system, and then because it's flaring up, you're getting inflammation. And trans fats, so trans fats are often in these things, they're in junk food. All right. Okay, and then going back to some of the issues, heart attack, stroke, the fake butter. So fat is not equal. These fake fats actually will clog your arteries. The healthy fats will actually help your arteries and coat your arteries. And so even 2% of calories from trans fats, which are in these fake butters, can increase your heart risk by 23%. So just a little bit of trans fat, these processed chemical laden fats, a lot of these X's here, they're processed with chemicals, they're depleted of their composition, they're heated to very, very high temperatures, so they're killing different things. And these trans fats that are in these oils are really hard on your body. They kind of harden your arteries. So it's not true that eggs are bad and they harden your arteries and work on your cholesterol. It's the bad chemical fats. We've kind of been lied to a little bit. All right. And so the reason why these trans fats are so hard on our body, I touched on that, but they're non-bioactive. So non-bioactive means that your body can't actually use it. So similar to the artificial sweeteners, the artificial oils, the body, the small intestine can't absorb it. And when it does, it can't process it. It'll just release it into the bloodstream. And the cells then try to use it for a metabolic purpose, but it can't. So it just kind of binds to enzymes and inhibits the enzymes from actually working. Enzymes break down your food. So it's occupying those enzymes and it's just kind of carrying it around. And then it'll just cause you to have a stiff membrane because it just kind of gets stuck in your body. So this sounds really gross, maybe getting a little too scientific, but the fake processed chemical laden fats, hydrogenated oil, vegetable oils, canola oil, margarine, fake butters, all of those types of oils are really toxic and they're really hard on the body because they've been very processed. When you have things like whole virgin coconut oil and olive oil, those are things that are in their natural form and will benefit the body. So think of processed fats as clogging your arteries. They're not good for you. They are causing inflammation, and healthy fats are doing the opposite. They're healthy for you. Short version again. We'll move on though. Oh, and then again, non-bioactive. Oh, and then one last thing I want to say about this. So palm oil, if you've heard of that, or palm oil, palm oil is grown by having lots of different palm trees and taking the oils from those. And the problem with this is, with olive oil, that's easier to harvest, avocados, but this palm oil that they genetically modify and make fields of is actually, they're putting these in things like Africa and South America, and they're making these giant palm fields to meet our need for these fake oils. And what ends up happening is that kills off the wildlife. So it's actually not environmentally friendly as well. So another reason not to eat processed oils and to eat more whole sources, even if they're a little more expensive. All right. Moving on, don't want to take too much time. So genetically modified organisms, GMOs. So GMOs are the result of a laboratory process where they're taking genes and DNA from one species and extracting them and creating an artificial species, or forcing the genes into a unrelated plant or animal. So this is the definition taken off, but I'll kind of talk about what this looks like. So these foreign genes can come from things like viruses, insects, animals, or even humans, which is really, really gross. But the reason why genetically modified foods came out is, as we approached this industrial age, we kind of had more resources to, with science, to start changing the DNA of foods. So what we would do is we would, we'll take something like corn and we'll inject a pesticide into the gene itself, and which is like something like Roundup, so that it keeps the bugs away. But then that ends up having an adverse effect on our body. And people at the time, this was cutting edge technology when GMOs came out in like the 50s, 60s, because they thought we'll feed all the children in Africa, which is such a good, heartwarming thing. But they started genetically modifying things like corn and wheat, where it would grow. The genes were all different. It would grow a lot faster. It would grow a lot fatter. And the problem with this was that the body was not designed for bioengineered food. The body was designed to eat food how it was grown. Our body recognizes an organic apple grown in our backyard from the dirt as an apple. It knows how to break down the fiber, the nutrition in it, all that things. But when we have an apple that has all these food dyes and colorings and pesticides on it, and it's been in the freezer for a year, and it comes out in the winter time when apples aren't really supposed to grow because it's been in a storage unit and it's been injected with all these things and modified to last longer, then our body eats that and goes, what is this? There's no nutrition in this. There's sure a lot of sugar in this. Where's the fiber? And the body doesn't really know how to break it down, and there's not sufficient nutrition in that apple for a body. Each food, whole food that we eat, has a purpose for it being as it is. So like this, for example, this egg, the organic egg, the fats in that little egg help you digest the proteins on the outside. So the egg has, the perfect amount of omegas. If you have the protein with the fat, it'll digest a little bit better. But then when you eat like something like just pure egg whites, or you're, genetically modifying it, the body can't quite, it doesn't have everything within it to digest it properly. So here's the problem with knowing what's genetically modified, not. The FDA does not have to mark something as genetically modified. So you may go to the store and buy chicken eggs or chicken and not, or like this little pepper here, and not realize that conventionally grown means that it's been genetically modified. And so not always has conventionally grown mean, or does it mean that it's been genetically modified, but a lot of times and often that is the case. So when the DNA is changed in our food, then our DNA is changed when we eat that stuff. So let's go on to corn, because corn is the biggest culprit of genetically modified stuff. So like I talked about, corn now, I would say 95% of corn is genetically modified, which is just stinky, because I love popcorn and corn thins and whatnot. I buy mine organic, but you still don't know sometimes. And what they've done with corn is they've taken the molecule of corn and they've injected the DNA with this pesticide called Roundup, so that when bugs eat it, their intestines explode and they'll stop eating it right away because it's so toxic to them. So the problem with this is that because it's exploding the guts of the bug, guess what it's doing to us? Now, the FDA thinks there's no problem, because it's toxic to bugs doesn't mean it's toxic to us, but we are having an increase of people with autoimmune diseases more than we've ever seen in the last 50, 60, 40, 30 years. And what this stems from a lot of times is the reason why we get so much inflammation is because our gut is only one cell wall thick. And when we get a permeable gut or leaky gut, then the lining of our intestines kind of pulls apart and we get all these little holes in our gut. And this can be from foods that are damaging our gut, foods that are genetically modified, foods that have chemicals on them that are just killing the villi, which are these little finger-like attachments to the gut that absorb nutrition. Those will actually die when they're exposed to too much toxic exposure or too many things that it doesn't know how to digest, because it'll sit on the villi, clog it, it'll die. And then when the gut becomes leaky, all these food particles, protein particles especially, will leak through the gut and it will cause an inflammation response. So this is near and dear to my heart, because I am actually celiac. That's a disease where you can't digest gluten, which has become very prominent with children, especially in the last 30 years. And what happens is when you eat gluten, which a lot of gluten and wheat is genetically modified as well, the body doesn't know how to process it. And this is as true with someone that has an intolerance as it is a celiac. It'll sit on the villi, kill the villi, we'll have a permeable gut, and then the food leaks into the gut. And then we get these autoimmune issues like chronic fatigue, adrenal failure, thyroid issues. Your thyroid your gut produces enzymes that produce the T hormones for your thyroid. So if you have a metabolism that's off and you're struggling with your digestion and you kind of feel tired all the time, you're bloated, you don't feel like you're ever full from your food, it could just be that maybe you have a permeable gut, or you've been eating things that have not been serving your gut for a very long time. So not to go into that too much, but I used to take thyroid medication because I had such a low thyroid, and it was because I had a very leaky gut and I had a lot of other issues. And I didn't realize the effect of GMO at the time, or that my celiac and eating a lot of gluten when I was younger had such a profound impact. So genetically modified food, the DNA has been changed. Like I said, Roundup is the thing. Roundup is a weed killer. That is the thing that is genetically modified into GMO corn and will put little holes in your gut, because that's what it is bioengineered to do. It's like a biological weapon that we're ingesting, which is so horrible. talked about leaky gut. No self-diagnosis here. You don't need to self-diagnosis yourself, but just removing, anybody can, have a little gut damage or whatever. Just removing genetically modified food as much as you can will significantly help this. And okay, so going back to gluten in the 60s, 70s, they started genetically modifying the structure of gluten so that they could feed more people, create more wheat fields. And unfortunately, what that did was it created this molecule. There's a few different proteins within the gluten protein that the body can't digest. It doesn't really understand what it is. And so it's this very glue-like, the gluten is that glue that's in the bread. The bread, why the bread is all gluey and squishy and delicious is gluten. And when you put that in your gut, it's like glue in the gut, and the gut does not know how to digest it, and it sticks to your intestines and it clogs the villi. So it creates issues in absorption. Now, this is not to say if you don't have a gluten allergy that you can never eat wheat again, but there are better options of gluten foods, and going gluten-free here and there isn't the worst thing that you can do. And some gluten-free foods are just as bad, I will say that, but these processed grains and milling these wheat stalks down to powder and, eating it in a baked form that has something with sugar in it as well. So like this bread that we eat, this white bread, we eat that, it turns into sugar very quickly in the body because it's been completely depleted of nutrition. This white bread, it's been bleached, it's been processed into a fine flour, and then you ingest it. And not only that, when it's genetically modified, the body is like, oh my gosh, this is an overload of toxicity that I don't know how to process. And it's just a mess. It's a mess. And so this is a little kind of off topic, but kind of relating. So gene expression is this idea that scientists have come up with in recent years, that you have all this, this genetic code, and there's different things within your genetic code that are expressed based on how you live your life. So someone, you'll have two twins and they grow up in different lives. One of them will be heavier or more sick, and the other one will be really healthy. Why? Because the child that is healthier was eating more of like not a vegan diet, but like a plant-based diet with a lot of fresh veggies and apples that are picked in the backyard. They live in Oregon. They're picking blueberries that are just, grown right there, organic, no spray blueberries. They're eating, grilled chicken that's the neighbor's chicken. They're outside walking with their family. And the other child is, eating a SAD diet, so a standard American diet, which is like burgers, whatnot. Your genes, as you eat food, change based on what you eat. So people just say, oh, I'm just, fat. Well, or, oh, I'm just meant to be sick. Well, your genes are just being expressed because of the way that you live in that way. It doesn't necessarily mean that that is your fate. So for example, I have a genetic disposition to, have cysts on my ovaries, and have like some hormonal issues and some gut issues from my family. I have a lot of family members with colitis, Crohn's, all those things, and I could self-diagnose myself and go, well, that's just in my genes. But instead, I take very good care of my body. I eat a very gut-friendly diet, and I had gut issues, and they were starting to happen, but I caught them early. And now I've changed the way that my body reacts because I've taken out these gene altered foods and put in natural foods that are really quality, and it's changed the way that my genes are. You can actually change your genes by the way that you think, what you eat, what you put into your body. You are not just it's not just completely up to nature, it's also up to nurture, what happens with your genes. So eating things that have had a change in their DNA will change your DNA. So keep that in mind when you're eating genetically modified food, because it's very different than what food is actually meant to be. And here's an example of some tests that have been done. So a lot of times grain-fed cows, pigs that are fed grains, them eating like soybeans are highly genetically modified as well as corn, eating a diet on that, they end up getting very fat on that diet. They gain a lot of weight on these high grain, genetically modified grain foods, and the farmers will actually feed them these high grain foods so that they'll get fat, so that it's a bigger yield for the animal. And unfortunately, because cows are meant to eat the grass, and pigs, at least a little bit healthier things, whole grains, a little bit of veggies and whatnot. when the cows are eating these grains, they're eating things that they don't have a lot of nutrition. So the cows then gain weight and can't stop eating because they're not getting enough nutrition. So that's why we have these really heavy cows and these really fatty meats. And the cows are, producing, a lot of inflammatory issues of themselves. So that's what you're eating when you're eating your food. So think about when you're eating meat. Meat isn't bad, but when you're eating meat that has been eating genetically modified grains or been held in a crate or has been inhumanely treated, then that is what you are putting into your body, and your body recognizes the differences between a depleted meat that doesn't have anything healthy in it and a meat that is full of vitamin A and B vitamins and nutrition and folic acid and different things, because that's what the cow gathered from the grass. So there's difference, and we'll talk about meats a little bit more, but these cows are having miscarriages and are just gaining weight and are dying because of the food that they're eating. And so again, with the refined grains, so genetically modified grains often are refined grains. So you'll find all these, wheat thins and crackers in the grocery store, and they're not whole. There's nothing in these grains, white bread, white crackers, that is going to serve your body. So just keep that in mind. It's fine to eat crackers, but find things with like some whole grains, some flax seeds in them, just whole things that are whole foods in the grains, or they've been created with organic rice flour. Even that's a little bit better than, processed GMO wheat flour. So always choosing the better option. Let's see. Oh, and then one last thing I wanted to say about going back to corn. So you have to be careful too with what's in the chemicals that they put in the grains. So for example, microwave popcorn has a lot of these different kind of like cheesy components, or it'll be this or that, and you're putting it in the microwave and heating up these genetically modified oils. And you're getting things like PFOAs, which is a cancer-causing chemicals that are in the bag. So when you're eating processed grains, just know that a lot of times there will be, these ingredients that you're not sure what they are. Research those, find out what they are, versus something that's just like organic brown rice. If you're getting, wheat bread, what is in that? Or white bleached bread, what is in that? Or what's been taken out of that? All right, going to produce. I want to go through these so that you guys aren't here too long. Okay, so produce is important because this is where most of our nutrition lies. All, fresh vegetables, fresh fruits, there's tons of vitamins and minerals, and we need those for our body to function. Our liver needs those to detox. We need magnesium to calm the body down. 95% of our population is deficient in magnesium, like we talked about with the sugar, because it takes so much magnesium to process these different foods and absorb the nutrition. Magnesium helps nutrition absorb, and we're all deficient in a lot of minerals because we're eating a lot of high sugar containing foods, and not to mention produce that's kind of devoid of nutrition. So when you eat a depleted food, your body has to use what nutrition it has within it to process that food. Now, if it's a food that's nutritious, you're replacing the nutrition or even adding a little more. But with like this Monsanto tomato that probably doesn't have any nutrition, when you eat that, it has carbs and maybe a little vitamin C in it, but that's about it. Maybe there's some fiber missing, maybe that, they've genetically modified it to last longer, so the nutrition is completely wiped out because it's an older tomato. Whatever it is, much of our produce is depleted and full of pesticides and chemicals, which really stinks, but it is the truth, and I just want to educate you. All right, so a lot of things, like, for example, can be grown or stored artificially or out of season. So apples is my favorite one because apples is a really big offender. I always buy my apples organic because I worry about this, where they'll take the apple and they'll grow it either in a weird season because they're putting a lot of chemicals in it to make it grow, or they'll grow that apple in season and maybe it's been genetically modified and they'll put it in a freezer. So you'll get these apples that are kind of like, they're not crisp. They're kind of like almost foamy on the inside, or like a little bit like spongy on the inside. These like really red apples, the red delicious apples are the biggest offender. And you'll bite into it. It's kind of like almost a little spongy, and you'll go, I wonder why this is. It's because it's been frozen and then they defrosted it. So it's really gross. But so you have to watch out for how genetically modified or conventionally grown foods are brought from a lot further away. They're modified to last longer. So these foods that are sitting on the shelves, these seemingly really healthy vegetables and fruits have been sitting and depleting of nutrition and have been modified in their genetic code. Much like this little strawberry here. We have an organic strawberry, ingredients strawberry, or conventional strawberry, ingredients, all these different things, maybe some food dyes, some preservatives that it's been injected with or genetically modified into the DNA so that it lasts longer. So that a lot of these fruits and vegetables too will contain or are coated with substances to kill animals and bugs. So much like the corn where it's genetically modified, they'll spray these pesticides, and even if you wash them, it's kind of soaked into the skin. And that's where the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen comes in, because a lot of those Dirty Dozen foods, the reason why it's so bad to buy them not organic is because they have a very thin skin, so they will absorb the pesticides much more than something like a sweet potato that has a little bit thicker skin. So then when you eat it, then you're getting the pesticides in the fruit even after washing it. Let's see here. Make sure I touch on everything. Let's see, what else is there? Yes, and then again, the genetically modified fruits and vegetables will last longer on the shelves. If you buy, you can do a test, and I have this in the homework where you buy a organic something and a non-organic something, and you kind of compare them. Maybe it's an apple, whatever it is. Leave them on your counter and see which one lasts longer. And when the organic one dies after a week, and then the non-organic one dies after 2 or 3 weeks, then you start to wonder, why does it last so long? That's a fresh vegetable. And you kind of start to get fishy at that point. And there's less nutrition when they last longer, because the nutrition when it's first picked, a fruit or vegetable, is the most nutritionally dense. And that's why I'm even an advocate for frozen vegetables, because if they were flash frozen right when they were picked, they're organic, they were put in the freezer, they've kind of locked in those nutrition or the nutrients. And sometimes frozen veggies are better than fresh ones when it comes to being genetically modified, not going to lie. Little tip there. So here's an example. I use the example of the apples in the freezer. A chemical called DPA is on conventional apples, especially those red delicious apples, and it is a cancer-causing agent. So it's been proven to cause cancer in rats and humans, which is terrible. So all this to say is, when we'll talk about what to look for at the store, but really just research which foods, like the Dirty Dozen, you have that worksheet, which foods are going to serve you the most to buy organic, and which ones can you have a little leeway and buy more conventional. I buy about 80% myself. I'll talk about that in a little bit, but kind of just keeping in mind and keeping these things in mind that non-organic foods often have been genetically modified or have additives to them and have been changed. Oh, and then the reason why I always encourage vitamins is because, unfortunately, even with organic produce, our soil has been very depleted over the years. Farmers have not taken, you're supposed to take 1 year out of every 7 to let the soil replenish. And there's really good microflora actually in our soil when it's in its good state, which is good. A lot of healthy bacteria, much like your gut and soil are kind of this very similar thing, where when the plants grow really vibrantly and nutritionally dense out of the soil, it's good soil. Same thing with your gut flora. When you have a good digestive system, you're able to digest and process and grow good probiotics from the prebiotic fiber in the gut. So same thing with soil. But when we don't give the soil a break ever, much like when we don't ever fast or we don't ever stop eating like a few hours before bed, if we're constantly eating, it doesn't ever give the gut or the soil a chance to replenish. So this is why we need to take a multivitamin, because a lot of times soil, even with organic produce, is not as nutritionally dense as it once was. All right, so animal products. So low quality and processed meats like these hot dogs and the bologna and this farm-raised fish, often they are shot up with, and even just conventional meat is shot up with hormones. And this messes with your hormones, because the type of hormones that they're putting in these animals are like antibiotics, different things that we would use to fight off viruses. And what that does is it completely wipes out the cow's gut flora, enzymes, all these healthy things in the cow. It makes the cow very sickly. And then when we're eating that meat, we're getting all those hormones and antibiotics in our bodies, which is really gross. So also, animals, so like I talked about the grain eating cows, they're eating these processed genetically modified grains and they're becoming sickly. They're devoid of nutrition. And so when you eat this cow, then you're devoid of nutrition. You're eating just a piece of meat, basically, which meat should be full of really good things. Like when I ate grass-fed butter, that cow ate it was a free-range cow. It was eating grass. I got all the vitamin A and nutrition from that cow. That cow was healthy. He had a good metabolism. His hormones were normal. Lots of nutrition in the meat because there's a lot of nutrition going into that cow's body. When you're eating an animal that has had devoid of nutrition and has been depleted nutritionally, then you're just getting the meat. There's not a lot of nutritional value in that meat like there should be. There should be a lot of nutrition value in meat. You should eat a lot less of it often. But unfortunately, the way things have been processed, that isn't always true. So we'll go back to the farm-raised salmon. So here's farm-raised versus wild. So the wild is naturally that pink color. It was caught wild. It was eating krill. It was swimming free. It was, it's growing the way that it should be. It has lots of good omegas. And then next to it, we have the farm-raised salmon, grown in a hostile environment. The fish was even maybe eating genetically modified soy, so it's devoid of nutrition as well. It's been fattened up and not growing in the way that it should. And then when the fish dies or is slaughtered, it's a gray in color, so they dye it with this pink type dye. So you can see the difference between wild and farmed, where the farmed is actually a gray color, but they've injected pink into it, or like a red dye, to make it look a little more natural, even though it is very not natural. And the dye is hard on our bodies and can clog our arteries. And especially red dyes are really bad for children with ADHD. It makes it flare up for them, which is so awful because a lot of children have issues with that. Hot dogs are, unfortunately, I'm going to ruin hot dogs for you, but hot dogs, especially like a brand like this, Oscar Mayer Wiener, is made with plastic and pig leftovers. So for it to have that squishy feeling, there's actually plastic in it. Same thing with the bologna next to it. And they actually will use mystery meat, including pig snouts, to grind up and make into hot dogs. And the outside of bratwurst and hot dogs is also pig intestines. So unfortunately, hot dogs taste amazing, but unless you're getting like a really good quality one, like a kosher one or an organic one or organic chicken sausage, this is what you're eating. Meats that ended up on the floor, they scooped them up, they grinded it all up, and they made it into a hot dog and put it into a pig intestine. And then we have the bologna next to it, which has been filled with nitrates and different hormones to last longer, and has been also added, mixed in with a little plastic, so it has that rubbery texture to it. And then also talking about dairy, just to touch on that a little bit, here's some things that cows are injected with, and all these hormones that the cows are injected with, those go into our milk, and then young women and even men are drinking this, and it's causing them to go through puberty at a much younger age because they're getting all these artificial hormones. And you'll see these young girls with very big breasts, you'll see them having their period at 8 years old, and it's a really unnatural thing because these girls are having a lot of hormones injected into their body because they're drinking all this milk, because we've been told, oh, milk is so good for you. But unfortunately, milk a lot of times, if it's not if it's not growth hormone free, so RBGH is the term you look for. So it's something growth hormone. It's a growth hormone that they inject into cows, and it makes them grow and mature and produce milk. That's what's happening to these young girls when they're drinking that, because it's spiking their hormones. And then they end up having hormone issues when they get older as well, because they're drinking all of these different things that have been injected into the cow that thus goes into our body. So it's not just like the cow eats it and then it goes away. We get those things from the cow into our body, much like a mom that's breastfeeding. If she drinks alcohol, that goes into the baby's body. If she eats, processed things, that goes into the baby's body. All right, so moving on to the next thing here. Going out to eat. So when you go out to eat, and let's say you go to a fast food joint, you can expect to eat a lot of these different chemicals. A lot of these I can't actually pronounce, to be completely honest with you, but a lot of them are chemicals that are found in different household products. So like the disodium phosphate one is found in mascara and mouthwash. So you're actually ingesting that from different foods that are at fast food joints. Calcium, disodium, found in skin products and hair and conditioning. So think about when you're eating processed meat, white bleached bread, going through the drive-through. And this is not every restaurant. There's good restaurants out there, and you can't be perfect. That's not what I'm saying. But just to educate you, when you're eating at a fast food joint food that it's very cheap, Taco Bell, McDonald's, these types of places, you're going to get a lot of these types of chemicals in your body. And unfortunately, we're not told what's in our food, and a lot of these foods are actually banned in other countries. So we're eating really chemically laden food, and we're having these adverse effects on our health. And all these foods are being banned in China, and even in some face products. So like Europe will ban a lot of these products in our food, even to be an additive in their face products, because they know that they're so toxic, and yet they let us eat them. So I'll talk about a few that I do know about. So let's for a moment talk about chicken nuggets. So chicken nuggets, McDonald's chicken nuggets, have a form of plastic, the same that's found in silly putty, in them. It's a type of silicone. I can't even pronounce what it's called. It's called dimethyl polysiloxane, and it can also be found in things like TV dinners. And to be fair as well, the bleach flour on the outside is probably genetically modified, and the meat on the inside might not actually fully be meat. Most of it may be more of that plasticky substance, which is really gross. But this is what chicken nuggets are made out of. And then we have fluoride. So this is kind of an interesting thing. I wanted to just throw this in there because I actually drink filtered water because I fear about this. So fluoride has been told that it's so good for you. It's so good for you. Fluoride in your water, just drink your tap water. But Nazis actually used fluoride in water. That's where it first started, to poison the water supply in labor and death camps to make the population more docile and controllable. So what the fluoride will do, it'll calcify your pineal gland, and it'll mess with your IQ. It'll mess with fertility. It'll mess with your drive, your initiative, your serotonin, all these different things with an overconsumption of fluoride. And so this is why it's important to really think about drinking water or bringing a water bottle with you. And now I'm going to drink my water. It's been filtered. I drink Arrowhead water. I try to buy alkaline water here and there, but fluoride water can build up and kind of calcify on different parts of your body. So it's just good to know. If you drink a glass of tap water, don't feel bad, but try drinking filtered water and see how much more hydrated you feel for a week, and see, just kind of to test it out. Let's talk about MSG. So MSG you're going to find at a lot of Chinese restaurants. Like a big offender is Panda Express. And this monosodium glutamate, aka MSG, has been linked to things like brain damage, endocrine disorders, behavioral disorders, adverse reactions, like allergy reactions, neurological disorders, or Alzheimer's, degenerative diseases of the brain, obesity, migraines, seizures, cancer, heart irregulations, asthma. And the most common things that MSG is in is maltodextrin, which is an additive and a binding agent in a lot of processed foods, hydrolyzed pea protein, so you have to be careful with your protein powders, caseinate, sodium caseinate, and yeast. The short-term effects of this can be, you just feel kind of sick, or, I feel like I had so much sodium. But the long-term effects is you're getting kind of this toxic processed version of salt into your body, and then it's like kind of almost poisoning you in a sense, and it can be addictive because it tastes so good. So these are just a few things that you can find in fast food joints. This isn't to say don't ever go out to eat. That's not what I'm trying to say. But when you do go out to eat, just looking for really quality options, seeing if the menu has like grilled things, vegetables, things that aren't as processed, things that aren't cooked in processed oils, or just finding a restaurant that, like, there's a great one here in Arizona called True Foods, that that the food is organic or non-GMO, or they have gluten-free and vegan options. Usually when a restaurant has gluten-free and vegan options, not that you have to order those, but it usually means that the quality of their food is going to be a little bit better, just as a rule of thumb. Not always, but as a rule of thumb. All right. So all this to say, and this is the very short version of this, I want you to do your own research when we move on, but let's go over a few things. So what do you want to look out for? So here's the sad diet. So there's a lot of processed breads and SpaghettiOs and pizza with bleached wheat flour and donuts and some soda and some straight orange juice. So focus on foods that are in their most whole form and make your favorite junk foods that don't serve you into health foods. So like, for example, I love pizza. So I'll make my own pizza crust, or you can buy a pizza crust at the store that's like a whole wheat pizza crust or a gluten-free pizza crust, or you can make a cauliflower pizza crust. There's recipes for that. And then, buying organic cheese that's free of growth hormone versus, just conventional cheese, then putting your own like grilled chicken on top of it. Or if you want to, find a piece of salami that's a little more of a healthier version, it comes from, a more whole source. For the pepperoni, and you want to, cut some fresh basil up, more whole versions, or just like a version that's just a little bit better is always a good way to swap your food out rather than just going straight to the Domino's. So always allowing yourself to have that option. Watch out for, let's move this, we can move this, processed meat, non-organic dairy, so dairy that's been injected with hormones. Oops, let's go back. I need to go back one. Things that have trans fats in them, or even just vegetables such as palm, canola, and peanut oil, things that have added sugars or artificial flavors or sweeteners, as well as refined processed GMO grains, traditional junk food, bleached wheat flour, conventionally grown, natural flavors, it'll say additives on it. And then any ingredients that you can't read, look up and see what those are doing to your body. So there was this, for instance, there was this one ingredient in my almond milk, and said it was carrageenan, I think is how it's pronounced. And I was like, I wonder what that is. So I looked it up. Well, it's this processed form of seaweed that's like overly processed, and it's really hard on your brain health and your diet. So my husband and I completely switched our almond milk for a little bit more of an expensive version because it was worth it not to be putting that in our bodies. But we didn't know what that meant until we researched it. So that's just a little bit on what not to eat. Really, what you want to do is just focus on what to eat, because if you get, a little bit of a genetically modified popcorn thing over here, and you go to a burger joint and you don't really know what's in the burger here, it's fine as long as you're getting mostly like at least 80%, 75 to start, 80, as much as you want to work up to whole foods. And this is things like you have organic fruits and veggies, or fruits and veggies that are local, or don't have pesticides on them, veggies, grass-fed meat, that cow was walking on a range and eating grass, cage-free chicken, they were out pecking around, they weren't shoved in a cage and fed food and fattened up, wild-caught fish, raw or soaked nuts and seeds and grains, and so on. And some of the labels to look for when you're shopping are, when you see something that's certified non-GMO, you know that food has not been genetically modified. And the same thing with organic. If something is organic, it doesn't have pesticides on it, it hasn't been sprayed, it hasn't been genetically modified, it hasn't been altered in any substantial way that is really taking nutrition out of it. So when you see something that is organic, you know that you're safe not to have at least as many toxic sprays, because sometimes organic will have more natural sprays, but they're plant-based. It's something that breaks down. It's something that is not been genetically modified. So these two labels are good labels to look for. And again, you don't have to all of a sudden snap your fingers and completely do everything organic, because it is more expensive. However, over time, if you kind of switch things up and kind of starting with your meat, doing, trying grass-fed meat, see how you feel. Try free-range chicken, see how you feel. The meats that are free of the hormones. And then try, a few organic vegetables, or just change your apples out. Doing one thing at a time, looking for these labels over time will make a big difference. Grass-fed, free-range, organic meats are the best quality meats that you can get. They don't have hormones in them. They're nutritionally dense. You may need a little less of the meat to really fill you up and make you satiated. And then local is another really great option. So if you go to a farmer's market or something, I know that we have one up our street, getting some veggies that were grown, some carrots that were grown locally, they just taste so good. And they were probably picked that weekend or the weekend before, and they're very fresh, and you're eating that in your food, and it's amazing. So you really can't taste the difference. So I made a little collage here just to kind of give you more of an idea in depth. So So again, good fats, the coconut oil, virgin coconut oil, salmon, flax seeds are really good fats. Ground up flaxseed, I make my waffles with that. You can use flaxseed instead of eggs. For baking, I put it on smoothies, yogurt, all that good stuff. It's just a little additive. It adds a little flavor. It kind of tastes a little bit like granola or something. You don't really taste it in things that much if you mix it in smoothies. Organic butter, grass-fed butter is the best. And then the bad fats, watch out for the margarine, all those things. Then the meats, grass-fed, free range, wild caught, looking for those types of things. Fresh veggies, local veggies. This is a picture at the farmer's market. I think that those white carrots are called daikons. I tried those for the first time this year. They're really good. I really like them. They cook really well in stir fries. And then you have the healthy grains over here. You have all fruits and veggies, especially organic, sprouted grain bread or whole wheat bread, rice, spelt, millet, and quinoa, whole grains in its whole form. Sweet potatoes. I love sweet potatoes, even white potatoes. And then I put my little protein shake on here. This is my protein shake I have because sometimes you do foods that are a little bit processed, but a lot of whole foods went into making this shake, and I feel really good on it, and it has a lot of pre and probiotics in it. So when it comes to something that's processed, I'd choose this over like a piece of gluten-free bread because there's a lot of whole foods like flax and chia seeds in this protein powder. And it really, I feel nourished by it, and it's helping me build muscle, and it's helping me get enough amino acids. And then also I have little vitamins at the top because that is a really good way to fill the gaps when you're not quite getting everything that you need from your food, which is unfortunately a real issue in our country today. So what do I eat in a day? So this is kind of like a little thing I posted before, but I just wanted to talk about it real quick. I like to eat, and I'll talk about how I eat a little bit too. I like to eat really small meals, and I like to have like a fresh produce at every meal. But something also really tasty at every meal because I don't believe in depriving yourself. I don't believe in being perfect either. So some of these things aren't organic. It's just the way that it is. Some of them are. But I try to get things in the most whole form. So I'll just really quickly go through this so that you can know kind of my mindset eating. The first little box in the very left corner at the top is I have Bulletproof Creo Brew. So that's cocoa beans that are organic that I brew like coffee. So it's a little less acidic. Coffee can have mold in it. So I try to avoid coffee. If I do coffee, I get a good kind, but try to be careful with it. And then I put grass-fed butter and MCT oil in it, which is just a form of coconut oil. And I mix that up with the Creo Brew, and it just makes a really good, healthy, fat little coffee in the morning for me. And it's just so delicious. I'm not afraid of fat. I will give up other fats for this because it's just so delicious, and I feel really good on grass-fed butter. And then next to it, I have these little paleo pancakes. So they're made with like almond flour and tapioca flour and a little bit of blueberries. I love blueberries. I just want a little bit, but eat that. That's my first meal. And then like an hour or two later, I'll have a little liquid. So I'll have kombucha, which is organic. It's a whole food. It's just they've used organic sugars to ferment this live SCOBY, and it creates pre and probiotics. And then there ends up not being that much sugar actually in the drink because it's been fermented into more of like a vinegary food for the SCOBY to produce. So that I drink that little guy, helps my gut health. I have some green juice because I don't feel like I get enough greens sometimes. I would say if you can get as many servings of greens as possible. Deep leafy greens are the thing that is really nutritionally dense. Things like greens and pumpkin seeds have magnesium. We're all deficient in magnesium. We need magnesium. So I try to get some greens in my diet. And I have my little luncher. I have coconut flour wraps with some chicken, a little avocado, a little hummus, and some salsa, and then some spinach. So I try to, these wraps, those are organic. They're just made with like coconut flour. I feel better myself not eating a ton of grains. I don't completely cut them out. I don't believe in that, but I feel really good eating more kind of low glycemic foods. So these coconut flour wraps have a lot of fiber in them, which is awesome. Then I'm getting some veggies, some healthy fats and carbs from the hummus, and some avocado. And then I have my little dark chocolate and pumpkin seeds for my snack. That's another snack. So each little box is its own snack. Maybe an hour or two later, or midday that I eat with these sea salt seaweed. I just love salt. And so these pumpkin seeds and the seaweed that's organic all has a little bit of salt on it. Now these pumpkin seeds, they've been sprouted because your body, when you sprout legumes, seeds, and grains, they're a little bit easier to digest in the body. So I try to do that as much as I can. Then I have some seaweed and apple as a snack. My apple is organic and it's a small one, so I'm just getting, a little bit of fiber, a little bit of sugar from that mid-afternoon pick-me-up. And then for dinner, I have some organic baby carrots. I really like baby carrots. I don't know why. And then I have some edamame pasta. So this is just edamame that's been dried, and then you just re-wet it. And you could do raw edamame and eat that. That would be more nutritious, but I just wanted some pasta, and I wasn't feeling any gluten-free pasta, so I did the edamame because it's higher in protein. And then just a little bit of chicken because there's so much protein in the edamame that I didn't need much. And then I have like a after-dinner snack, and it's just a little hot chocolate. So organic almond milk with no additives in it, little cocoa powder, organic cocoa powder, and then just a touch of stevia. I get an organic brand because I don't really need to have it sweetened. I don't always sweeten it, but that's just like a little treat that I'll have here and there. So this is like a day's worth of eating. This is about 1,500 plus calories, just to kind of give you a rough estimate. It's a little over that because that's my caloric intake right now. As I build muscle, I can always increase that. But right now, this really satiates me. That's what I need to reach my goals. And I really feel good on that. So that's kind of what I eat in a day. And I eat multiple times a day, and I try to eat organic as much as possible, get lots of fruits and veggies in, good quality meat. Our chicken is free range that we have right here. The paleo pancakes are the only thing that's really processed. I didn't do protein powder that day. Usually I do. But I got enough protein within what I ate there to do that. And then also I have some organic collagen protein that I did put in my coffee or my Creo brew. So that's just kind of what I eat in a day to give you an idea. You probably, I would say at least 80 to 90% of this is organic, just because that's very important to me because it's really changed my health so much. Maybe I'm a little more sensitive than most people, but my gut is kind of my little holy grail of health. I like to really take care of it. And when I eat genetically modified food and a lot of grains or a lot of nuts and seeds or legumes, I often kind of get upset, especially if they are, if I'm eating them in excessive amounts. So I don't limit myself to not eat grains, but I do try to eat things that are more fiber rich, that are a little bit low glycemically. All right. So the takeaways today are just research what's in your food. Don't be too scared of everything I shared. And I did a really brief summary because I didn't want to go into too much depth. It would take so much time. But just look into what is in your food. What is MSG? What is it in? What is is it really important to buy free range chicken? Should I buy organic strawberries or apples? Which one's more important? Just kind of research what you're eating, or what is in this Arby's meal that I'm eating, or what is in this True Foods meal that I'm eating, or what is in this, this packaged meal that I'm eating. Research what's in your food, because when you do that, you're taking responsibility for knowing what's in your food, and you're taking your power back. So often we feel tired and we feel sick and we're having weight issues and inflammation. And it's because we don't realize what's in our food and how it's affecting us and how it can be negatively affecting us in the long term. And a rule of thumb is just eat whole foods with the least amount of ingredients as possible. So if you have a protein shake and you have one that has, 15 ingredients versus 30, choose the one that has 15 ingredients. But if you have the one with 30 ingredients is, whole kale, whole chia seeds, and the other one is, hydrogenated whey protein and red dye 3, then choose the one with 30 ingredients because those are whole foods that have been all put together. And then I get this question a lot. Why not just eat whole? Now, I did this for a long time and I still eat just whole food for the most part. But the reason why we do macros and why we focus on getting enough carbs, protein, and fats, and why we say, 80-20, eat 20% what you like that fits in your macros, and then the other 80% try to eat really whole. The reason why we do that is because macros, the composition of those numbers is what's going to change the look of your body. So when your protein is high, you're going to have enough carbs for your muscle growth, when your fats are there but not too high, then you're recompositioning your body. You're giving your body the macronutrition to build muscle, to burn fat, but to also function in a really big way. The micronutrition and eating whole foods and eating quality foods is the thing that's going to give you longevity over the long run. So you could eat junk food and still lose weight, but it may mess with your thyroid, it may mess with your metabolism, it may upset your gut, it may hurt your digestion, it may make you feel depressed. So that's the trade-off, is that you can eat whatever you want and still lose weight within your macros, but unfortunately, if you eat that way, then you're going to have long-term health issues. Whereas if you meet your macros, but you're eating really whole foods, and then every once in a while you're like, I just want a Red Robin's burger, but it fits your macros, then you're nourishing your body and giving your body tons of nutrition so that it can process all the energy that it's getting and turn it into more energy, into muscle, into, keeping your gut really healthy, into having your digestion flow really well, into keeping your gut biome really healthy so you're absorbing all the nutrition you eat. So eating whole is so important, but the macros are just an added bonus to check in with what nutrient amounts of macronutrition you need, and so that you can recomposition your body. The whole foods, I would say, is, in my personal opinion, is the most important part. You could eat whole foods and lose weight, but the macros are that added bonus of what's going to help me nourish myself in the best way in a macronutrition sense, so that as I'm working out, as I'm eating my whole foods, as I'm learning to cook, I can still lose weight and look really amazing and know that I'm getting the right amounts of everything. And ultimately, it's just about balance. Now, I go out to eat and I get, I order things from a restaurant, and of course I'm careful with my gluten and whatnot, but the other day I got a gluten-free burger, and it was very greasy, and it had gluten-free bread on it. It was delicious, and I just enjoyed it, and it fit my macros. So I like to have flexibility as well, but I also keep in mind, I really want to take good care of my body. I want to last longer. I want my skin to look good. I want my digestion to look good. So I'm keeping these things in mind too. When I go to the grocery store, when I buy bread, it's whole grain bread for my husband. I don't even really buy bread for myself. I'll buy, different things for my wraps and whatnot, but it's just eating those whole foods and focusing on the balance of finding the things you like and also meeting your nutritional needs. So the homework this week is to read the food label worksheet. So there's a worksheet that talks a little more in depth about food labels and how to, when you go to the grocery store, how to kind of look out for that. Then there's the food investigator worksheet. So this is just a short worksheet that you're going to do a little homework on. You're going to do a little research on 3 whole foods and what they're doing for your body, and 3 junk foods and what they're doing to your body. And then the last thing is, so to choose, and hopefully you have time for this. It would be so beneficial if you carved out some time for this. I'm giving you the choice, but this is a really important thing, is to choose one documentary from the list. So if you go into this week's module, so it's module 7, and you look at the additional resources, there's some additional videos that you can watch that talk about health and talk more on this topic that I love. And there's also a list of different videos that I've watched that talk about the world's health. So I've briefly touched on in this segment different things that are going on with our foods. These go into massive depth, and some of them go into depth about meat, which is like, I've had friends that have gone completely vegan after watching these. So just keep that in mind, that some of them are intense. My favorite one is Fed Up is a good one, and Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead is another really good one. But any of those documentaries on that list are great. You can find almost every single one on Netflix or on YouTube. They're free. So this is like a free thing. You don't have to go rent it. You shouldn't have to. They're free resources that people in the health community have created, put out, so that we can be educated. And then here's another little bonus thing, if you have time. So choose one food that you normally eat, buy one conventional and one organic or non-GMO version. It can be an apple, it could be bread, it could be pumpkin seeds, it could, whatever you want it to be. And do taste tests, see if it tastes differently. So for example, my husband and I, we did this with beef. So we did conventional beef, just like, a steak that was conventional, and a grass-fed steak. The grass-fed steak is one of the most delicious things ever, and you just feel so satisfied. And that is the way that you should feel about your whole foods. And It's why my meals are often simple. I spice my meals a lot, but I'm so satisfied with the quality of my food that I don't really need a lot of different like sauces and flavorings and different things, because those foods are so nutritionally dense and they're so flavorful just on their own. And your body can get used to that. But, you know, I add things like curry and Himalaya sea salt and garlic powder to my stir fries, and that satisfies me because it's good quality of all of those things. So try taste test. Try it with meat or vegetables or fruit, whatever you want to do, and see how it works for you. And that is it for that. All right, how do I turn your screen back on?